The highway stretched out in front of me, empty and endless, swallowed by fog and broken streetlights. The asphalt was cracked and faded, the paint lines barely visible, and every mile felt like I was driving deeper into nowhere. My headlights cut through the mist in thin beams, but beyond that, there was only silence. The radio hummed with static, no stations coming through, just that low, shifting sound that seemed to match the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I rolled the windows down, hoping for fresh air, but what came in was colder than it should have been, like the night itself was breathing against me. Up ahead, a single light flickered, a gas station sign. It shouldn't have been there. I knew this stretch of road was abandoned years ago. Still, I slowed, drawn in, until I realized the bulbs weren't electric at all. They pulsed, faintly, like they were alive. That's when I saw the figure standing beneath it. The highway was empty. Fog rolled low, curling around the cracked asphalt like smoke. Night had settled early, the kind that swallows every detail. I saw it then. A gas station, abandoned. Its sign flickered faintly, like a heartbeat you could almost feel. The light pulsed. Not steady, not regular. I slowed. The tires whispered across wet pavement. A rusting pump leaned to one side, its metal groaning softly in the wind. Beneath the sign, a figure stood, tall, thin, motionless. I blinked, thought I imagined it. The pulse of the lights seemed to sync with my own breath. The door to the station hung open, swaying. A hollow creak, then silence. I stepped closer. Fog wrapped my legs in cold dampness. Every step felt heavier than the last. The figure didn't move. Or maybe it did, ever so slightly. I couldn't tell. The air smelled faintly of gasoline. Old, sour, mixed with the wet earth. It made my chest tighten. A humming noise rose from somewhere inside. Not a machine. Not quite a voice. Just a low, steady hum that pressed against my ears. I stopped. The sign flickered again. Each flash painted the figure in slices of pale light. It wasn't human. Or maybe it was. I couldn't decide. A crow cawed somewhere beyond the fog. It startled me, though I knew it wasn't near. Shadows twisted under the pumps, moving when I didn't. The wind shifted. Soft footsteps, or maybe just my imagination, rustled across the gravel. I felt watched, always watched. I wanted to leave, but curiosity held me still. The pulsing light seemed to pull me closer, closer to the figure. Its shape grew sharper. The night felt thicker, heavier. Every heartbeat echoed through my chest. I could see its face now, or what should have been a face. Hollow, pale, empty. The humming grew louder. Not louder in volume, but in presence. It filled the space around me, wrapped around my thoughts. I reached the edge of the pumps. The figure remained still, yet somehow closer than before. Breath. I could hear mine. And then another, soft, shallow. Behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just fog. Just the faint flicker of a sign. The lights blinked once. Twice. Then stayed steady. Too steady. The figure had vanished. I searched. Every shadow, every corner, every rusted pump. Nothing. Only the hum lingered. Soft. Endless. I left. The tires whispered across the wet asphalt again. The fog swallowed the gas station behind me. And when I looked back one last time, the sign pulsed once. Slow. Steady. Like a heartbeat. Waiting. I didn't stop again. Night had already wrapped the highway in its quiet gray fog. The air was damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and cold metal. I sat behind the wheel, alone, and the car hummed beneath me. The radio flickered, a low static constant, like the hum of a distant machine. I tried to turn it off. It wouldn't stop. Fingers brushing the dial, I tuned slowly. And then voices, soft, shifting, whispers curling through the static, names and numbers that felt like coordinates. They didn't speak all at once, just fragments, teasing, beckoning. I leaned closer. The dashboard was cold under my palms. My breath fogged the glass. Each exhale carried the hum of those voices deeper into the car. The numbers repeated. The names repeated. One voice, clearer than the rest, said mine. I froze. The radio pulsed with a rhythm. Not quite a heartbeat, but close. The hum pressed against my ears, through my chest. It wrapped around my ribs, soft and insistent. Static flared brighter, louder, filling every corner of the car. Then, almost as if it were afraid, it dropped to a whisper again, and I could hear the names, all of them, spoken slowly, carefully. I reached for the window. Cold metal, damp condensation. Outside, fog pressed against the glass, curling over the wipers. It smelled of rain, of earth, of something waiting. The radio shifted. Coordinates again. I noted them in my mind. Places I didn't recognize. Places I knew I shouldn't go. But the hum, it followed me. Soft, persistent, as though the voices were inside the car, inside me. Breath matching breath, pulse matching pulse. I tried to leave. Turned the key. The engine whispered to life. The hum stayed. The names lingered in the static, floating just behind my ears. My hands shook. The leather wheel rough beneath my fingertips. The fog outside thickened, hiding the road. Yet the coordinates whispered, calling me forward. I couldn't stop listening, even as fear pooled in my stomach. Even as my eyes stung from the dim dashboard glow. Every name, every number, carved into the night. Then silence. Not complete, but enough. The static faded, leaving only a soft, vibrating hum. It wasn't off. It was waiting. I exhaled slowly. The car felt heavier. The fog pressed closer. Outside, the highway stretched endlessly, gray and soft and infinite. The radio ticked once more. A name. My name. I didn't touch the dial again. I didn't move. I just listened. And the hum, the whispers, they followed me, quiet, insistent, into the dark stretch of road ahead. The night was thick. Fog draped the highway in a soft, gray veil. The car hummed beneath me, tires brushing wet asphalt. I hadn't seen another soul for miles. Just the road ahead, pale and endless, and the radio's hum, low, almost comforting. Then a click. I froze. The passenger door. I hadn't touched it. The handle hadn't moved. And yet, the soft, hollow click echoed inside the car. I glanced in the rear view. At first, nothing. Then a shadow, faint, shifting, sitting in the seat beside me. I blinked. The shape was human. I thought, a form in the darkness. But wrong. Too still. Too wrong. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. Leather pressed cold into my palms. The hum of the engine thrummed against my chest. The figure didn't breathe, or if it did, I couldn't hear it. I tried to turn. Nothing. The seat was empty, but the shadow lingered, a presence heavier than the fog. The streetlights passed in pale flashes, each one illuminating something, a face, or the hint of one, always gone before I could see. I felt its attention, soft, pressing, like fingers against my shoulder. Not touch, exactly, just awareness. And it was patient, waiting. I exhaled slowly. The fog outside pressed against the windows. The smell of wet asphalt and distant pine drifted in. Cold air curled around my legs. Another click. The door. Closer this time. The shadow, it moved. Or maybe I did. Impossible to tell. I dare not speak. My own voice would shatter the night. Instead, I watched. Tires whispered across wet pavement. Every reflection in the glass shifted. The rear view caught again. Sitting there, always watching. The outline of something human. But the edges, wrong. Too thin. Too tall. Not alive, but breathing. I wanted to stop. To pull over and run. But something held me. Not fear exactly. Curiosity. Or maybe disbelief. The fog thickened. Soft, wet strands brushing the windows. The engine hummed low, and the shadow remained. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Something shifting behind me. A subtle lean, almost imperceptible. Soft fabric brushing leather. I dared not turn. A streetlight flickered. The shadow's face was clearer this time. Empty eyes. Pale. Watching. Silent. The road curved. The tires whispered over gravel. The shadow leaned closer. Not quickly. Not suddenly. Just closer. My chest tightened. Breath shallow. The hum of the car filled my ears. The shape stayed beside me, patient, waiting. Another click, and the door ajar. Just a fraction, but enough. Enough to make the fog creep inside the car. I exhaled. Fog curled around my arms. The shadow leaned back slightly. Motionless again, just watching. Minutes passed. Or seconds. Time didn't feel real. The road stretched endlessly. The shadow remained beside me, silent, still. I realized then it didn't belong in the seat. It wasn't riding. It was waiting. Waiting for something I didn't understand. The highway narrowed. Tires whispered over the wet asphalt. The fog pressed closer. And still, the figure remained. I dared one glance. Eyes hollow. Pale light from the dashboard caught faint reflections on its skin. Or maybe it was only the fog. I couldn't tell. The car hummed. The engine pressed against my chest. The tires whispered. The shadow breathed. I wanted to stop. I wanted to run. But the road stretched before me. Endless. And the shadow patient. Another click. The door closed this time. The fog withdrew slightly. The air warmed a fraction. But the feeling remained. Watching. Waiting. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I drove. And every few moments, another click reminded me I was never alone. Not really. The shadow rode with me. Silent. Still. Waiting. Until the highway swallowed us both into the fog. The highway stretched on, gray and quiet. Fog pressed low against the asphalt, curling into the car's headlights. Night had fallen deep, and the world felt smaller, tighter. Then a sign, faint, flickering. An old motel, its letters buzzing softly like a distant neon hum. I slowed. The tires whispered over wet pavement. The air smelled of damp earth and old paint. The sign's light flickered again. Soft, pale, almost inviting. I pulled into the gravel lot. Rusted metal groaned under the tires. The building sat quiet, untouched. Windows dark, doors closed, yet something fell off. The front desk was empty. Dust coated the counters, thick and soft. A bell sat quietly, motionless. I pressed it once. No sound responded, except the hum of the sign outside. The hallway stretched away in dim light. Each step whispered across worn carpet. The smell of bleach and old wood pressed in. The air was cold, though the night was mild. I opened a door. A room. Beds untouched. Sheets folded with care. Yet the impressions of someone just leaving were there. Soft depressions in the mattress. Small wrinkles in the pillow. I ran my hand across the linen. Cold but firm. No dust. As if someone had just been here, or had never left. The window creaked. A breeze, though the panes were shut. Shadows moved in corners of the room. The faint hum of the motel sign reached inside, vibrating softly against my chest. I moved to another room. Same story. Bed shaped as though recently vacated, yet untouched. The air smelled faintly of perfume, something floral and old. I shivered. Footsteps, or something like them, rustled in the hallway. Soft, distant. I held my breath. Waited. Nothing. Only the humming sign and the faint flicker of the lights. Still, the feeling lingered, that someone or something was just beyond the doorframe. I leaned against the wall. Cold paint pressed into my shoulder. I listened. A whisper? A rustle? Or only imagination, born from the quiet? I opened the final room. A bed, perfect, indented. A faint warmth or memory of warmth, pressed against the sheets. I touched it. Nothing. The air smelled of dust, but also something fleeting, copper, maybe blood. The hallway seemed longer now, lights flickering in a rhythm too slow to follow. Shadows stretching against walls, bending unnaturally. The building, breathing softly, waiting. I stepped back into the main hall. The bell on the counter shifted slightly, though I had not touched it. The hum outside pulsed, faintly, through the walls. A soft vibration under my feet. The motel seemed alive, not in scream or shout, but in small movements, small sounds. Rooms that remembered, beds that waited, and shadows that lingered where none should be. I wanted to leave, the car keys cold in my hand, fog pressing against the windows. but something compelled me to stay a moment longer. The front desk reflected in the glass. Empty, yet the reflection moved differently than I did. Slower. Watching. I exhaled, stepped back toward the door. The gravel lot glimmered faintly under the sign's buzzing light. The air smelled of wet metal and night. As I reached the car, the breeze shifted. Soft, fleeting footsteps whispered behind me. I dared not look, and when I finally did, nothing moved. Yet the beds inside the motel, they were still waiting. I started the engine. The hum of the car mingled with the motel's soft buzz. Tires whispered across the gravel. I didn't look back, but the image stayed. Beds indented, untouched, rooms perfect and waiting, and the faint, soft vibration of a place alive in quiet ways. The highway swallowed me again, and behind me, the motel hummed softly, a presence lingering, not angry, not violent, but impossible to shake. Even now, the memory hums in the chest, soft, insistent, a quiet place that remembers and waits. Fog hugged the highway again. The night was thick and low, pressing against the car like a wet cloth. Tires whispered across cracked asphalt. I noticed the reflectors first. Small, metal posts lined the road. Their round tops caught the headlights. At first, I thought it was just light, a blink here and there, but then I realized they weren't just reflecting. They were blinking, slowly, almost like eyes, watching, waiting. I blinked, shook my head. The highway hummed beneath me. Tires whispered. The fog pressed in tighter. Each reflector caught the light and pulsed. Closer, farther. I could feel it more than see it. A presence along the edge of the road. I slowed the car. Fog curling around the tires, wet and cold. The air smelled of damp earth and metal. The blink, it matched my heartbeat. Soft, irregular, insistent. I leaned forward, eyes scanning. There, another blink. Closer than before. Then farther, moving with the curve of the road. Or was it moving itself? The highway seemed longer now. Tires whispered over the cracked lines. The hum of the engine low, steady. And the eyes blinking, watching. I tried to count them. Every reflector, every post along the shoulder. Some disappeared into fog. Some lingered too long. Their blinks deliberate, the sensation of being followed, pressed in, not by a person, by something else. Cold, unblinking, even when it blinked. The fog thickened. Soft scratches along the roof, or maybe the wind. The lights and the reflectors blinked in sequence. Patterned, almost intelligent. I felt the hair rise on my arms, the wheel slick under my palms. Every pulse of the headlights caught an eye, and every eye seemed to stare straight through me. I blinked again, tried to convince myself it was reflections or fatigue, but the blinking it followed, not just along the road, beside the car, in the mirrors. I dared not speak. The engine hummed, tires whispered, and the eyes continued, blinking, waiting. One reflector closer, too close. Its blink was slower, intentional. I caught it in the side mirror, a pale, round reflection, then gone. But I felt it linger, something watching from the fog, patient, deliberate. The road curved sharply. Tires whispered over the wet asphalt. Fog pressed against the windshield. And the reflectors, blinking, blinking, always blinking. I slowed to a crawl, hand trembling against the wheel. Every blink matched my pulse. The lights seemed to follow me, keeping pace, watching me pass. I dared to glance behind. Nothing. The highway stretched empty. Yet the feeling remained. The blink of those metal eyes imprinted on my chest, my skull. I exhaled slowly. The air smelled faintly of ozone, of rain-soaked metal. The fog shifted, curling into the mirrors. Another blink, another pause. Then, one by one, the reflectors returned to normal. Still, silent, the highway quiet. But the memory lingered, cold against my spine. A sense of being followed. Not by a car, not by a person, but by eyes that waited patiently at the edge of the night. I didn't slow again. I didn't look back. The fog swallowed the blink, but never the feeling, never the knowledge that something watched and waited just beyond the pale light. The fog thickened again. It hugged the asphalt, curling around the tires, wet and cold. The night smelled of damp earth, metal, and something faintly acrid. I drove slowly. The highway stretched in pale, broken lines ahead, and then the road changed. The pavement dissolved beneath the tires. Not cracks or patches, but nothing. The asphalt gave way to dirt, loose, soft, uneven. I blinked, looked down. The car hummed beneath me. The tires whispered across gravel now, not asphalt. And when I looked ahead, the pavement returned, but farther down the road than it had been before. I blinked again, a trick of perspective, I told myself, but my chest tightened. The hum of the engine pressed against my ribs. The road dissolved once more. Dirt, dust, gravel. Tires whispering over shifting ground. And then pavement again, even farther than before. I slowed, hand gripping the wheel. The fog pressed against the windows. Breath caught in my chest. Something about the road felt wrong. The landscape stretched endlessly. Dark shapes of trees loomed in the fog, their shadows long, bending strangely toward the highway, and the road vanishing, returning, shifting like a mirage. I tried to count the stretches. Each time, it returned farther along than it should have. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe fatigue, maybe shadows in the fog, but the feeling, the sense of displacement, it pressed against my skull. Cold, heavy. The highway was unbroken behind me, yet gone. Another stretch of dirt. The tires whispered over loose gravel. Soft hum of the engine. The fog carried a smell of wet clay, something raw and mineral. Then asphalt, farther down. I gripped the wheel tighter. Leather rough under my fingers. The road under the tires felt wrong. Not solid. Not safe. I dared to glance in the rear view. Nothing. Just fog curling around the shoulder. The tires whispered. The hum of the car persisted. But the road, shifting, always shifting. I felt dizzy. Time seemed to stretch. The headlights illuminated the same stretch of fog over and over. Yet the distance traveled impossible. Every curve returned me farther than before. I reached a straight stretch. The pavement seemed solid, yet a flicker at the edge of my vision. Dirt again, a patch of gravel. I blinked. The pavement returned farther than it had been moments ago. I exhaled. The air smelled faintly of rain, wet stone, and something metallic. The fog pressed against the windshield, curling into the corners, cold and damp. Every heartbeat echoed against the tires, the engine, the road. The vanishing stretches grew longer. The intervals between asphalt and dirt, unpredictable. The road seemed to mock me, shifting beneath the car, just beyond my control. I wanted to stop, pull over, step onto solid ground, but the fog swallowed the shoulder. No shoulder to stop on, no solid earth to stand on, only the shifting highway. I dared to glance behind. Empty, just a soft curling fog, the hum of the engine, whispering tires. No landmarks, no lights, only the feeling of displacement. A patch of dirt under the tires, soft, shifting, and then asphalt, and then farther down than it had been. I tried to map it in my mind. Impossible. Every time I thought I understood, the road dissolved again. Every time I felt safe, it shifted farther ahead. Cold sweat ran down my neck. The fog pressed against the car, curling in, damp and insistent. The tires whispered. The engine hummed, and the highway vanished, then returned, then vanished again. I realized I was moving, but the world wasn't. The road, not fixed, not stable. I was adrift, carried by asphalt that wasn't truly there. Minutes or hours passed. I couldn't tell. Every blink brought the road farther from where it should be. Every exhale pressed the fog closer. Finally, a stretch of pavement seemed solid, long, unbroken, infinite, but the feeling remained. The subtle unease, pressing the chest, the hum in the tires, the whispers of the fog. I kept driving, eyes forward, hand gripping the wheel. The road beneath me, vanishing, returning, shifting, and I moving but not moving. The highway swallowed me whole, and somewhere just beyond the fog, it waited, not a road, not a path, but something older, patient, shifting, and I knew the vanishing would not end. The highway stretched endlessly, swallowed by fog and night. The air was cold, damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and pine. My tires whispered over the pavement, soft, persistent. Then I saw them. Above the road, pale lights hovered. 3, perfectly aligned, moving in formation. Silent. I blinked, tried to convince myself it was reflections or distant headlights. But they didn't move like cars. Not like anything I had ever seen. The fog curled around the beams. Soft white, almost glowing against the night. The air seemed thicker, humming faintly, pressing against my chest. I slowed the car, tires whispering, the engine low, a steady vibration beneath me. The lights moved smoothly, keeping pace with my car. Or perhaps I was moving toward them. I leaned forward, eyes straining. The highway stretched in pale lines beneath the lights. Every detail sharpened, yet impossible to comprehend. The formation stayed perfect. Silent, waiting, watching. I realized they weren't close, but they felt close. The hum of energy, almost imperceptible, pressed through the tires into my chest. A vibration that seemed alive. The fog thickened. My breath fogged the windshield. The lights shifted slightly, as if acknowledging me. Not threatening, but not neutral either. I reached to adjust the radio. Low static hummed, but no voices. The lights above continued their silent drift, moving slowly, deliberately, perfect symmetry. A shiver ran through me. The highway beneath me seemed smaller, narrower. The trees on the side leaned closer, shadows stretching toward the lights. The air smelled faintly of ozone, metal, and rain. I dared to blink. When my eyes opened, the lights vanished. The sky was empty. Nothing above but fog, stretching infinite, gray, silent. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered against the asphalt. My chest ached with absence. I glanced around. No landmarks. No glow from towns or signs. Just the road and the emptiness above. The fog pressed against the car. Cold, damp, curling into every corner. I could feel the absence of those lights more than see it. A weight in the air. A silence that filled every space. Then, a flicker. Far ahead, 3 pale points reappeared. Still aligned. Still hovering. I slowed again. The engine hummed low. Tires whispered. The formation drifted silently. I felt watched. Not by anything human. Something beyond comprehension. I tried to blink, to shake my eyes. The lights moved as if aware, matching my pace. Perfect formation, perfect distance, unbroken symmetry. The fog shifted. The cold pressed closer. Breath fogged the glass. I felt the vibration in my chest again, a rhythm that was not mine, yet familiar, as if calling me forward. And then, gone. Nothing. Only the highway stretched empty. Silent. Endless. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered over cracked asphalt. The night pressed around me. The air smelled faintly of wet stone and pine. I tried to make sense, rationalize, but nothing fit. The lights had not simply disappeared. They had chosen to vanish, and their absence lingered. I drove on, eyes forward, hand gripping the wheel. The highway stretched endlessly beneath me, and somewhere above, beyond the fog, beyond the night, the 3 lights waited, perfectly aligned, silent, patient, watching. The highway curved into darkness. Fog clung low, curling around the tires, cold and damp. I saw it then, a tunnel, old, cracked, swallowing the road whole. I slowed. Tires whispered over the wet asphalt. The air smelled of stone, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The mouth of the tunnel yawned, black and endless. The headlights reached into it, pale and weak, walls lined with peeling paint and damp streaks. The farther I drove, the deeper the darkness swallowed the light, and the hum of the engine, louder, closer, pressing against my chest. I glanced in the rear view. Nothing, just a faint curve of fog curling at the tunnel's mouth. But the walls seemed to stretch, longer than they should be. The exit, farther than I remembered seeing from the highway. Tires whispered over the cracked concrete. My breath fogged the windshield. The smell of damp stone pressed in, thick, heavy, and the darkness ahead, endless. I leaned forward. The tunnel seemed to stretch, elongate. Each headlight beam reflected farther than it should, fading into nothing. The walls pressed in slightly, I thought, or maybe my mind imagined it. A soft echo of sound drifted behind me. Not the tires, not the engine. Something subtle, a shift, like the tunnel itself was breathing. I tried to blink it away. The walls stretched further. Each meter traveled felt slower. Time stretched, elongated like the darkness ahead. The air grew colder. Mist formed on the inside of the windshield. Tires whispered against cracks, against worn patches of concrete. A faint vibration ran through the car, subtle, insistent. I glanced at the dashboard. The hum of the engine seemed louder than before. The tires whispered steadily. And yet the exit nowhere in sight. The headlights caught something on the walls. A flicker, a shadow, or a reflection of my own tired eyes. It shifted when I looked directly, always just beyond perception. The further I drove, the longer the tunnel seemed to stretch. Walls receding, then bending closer. The ceiling dropping, then rising. The sense of distance became disorienting. Every meter traveled felt like a mile. I exhaled slowly. The air smelled damp, metallic, ancient. Fog clung inside, thickening around my arms and legs. The engine hummed beneath me. Tires whispered over worn concrete. I dared a glance in the rear view again. Nothing but darkness, yet a feeling, presence. Something patient, waiting, observing my progress through the tunnel. I tried to focus on the lights ahead. The exit should have been visible by now, but it stretched farther than memory allowed. The beam of my headlights disappeared into blackness. The tunnel lengthened, swallowing every sense of space. The hum grew insistent, low, vibrating, pressing against my chest. The tires whispered. I exhaled, fog in the windshield further. The walls shifting subtly, just enough to unbalance my perception. A drop of water fell from the ceiling, splashing faintly on the hood, soft, echoing in the hollow tunnel. The sound lingered, as if the space itself remembered it, and then silence, long, suffocating silence. I gripped the wheel tighter. The car hummed beneath me. Tires whispered. The exit still unseen. The tunnel stretched endless, infinite. I couldn't tell if time passed or stopped. Each breath carried the smell of damp stone, cold metal, and fear. Every heartbeat echoed in rhythm with the tires, the hum, the darkness, and then a subtle shift, a shadow against the wall. Not solid, not quite moving, but alive in perception. I exhaled slowly. The fog pressed against my face. The engine hummed low, constant. Tires whispered steadily. The tunnel went on. No light, no end, only the hum, the whispers of tires, the cold pressed tight, and me, moving endlessly into the suffocating black. I realized then the tunnel didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to keep moving into its infinite stretch. And I would. Fog lay thick across the highway. The air smelled of wet asphalt and cold pine. Tires whispered over cracked pavement, soft, steady. Night had folded the world into gray, silent nothingness. I saw him then, a lone figure on the shoulder, a hitchhiker, standing perfectly still, his thumb raised, waiting. I slowed. The tires whispered over gravel at the edge of the road. Fog curled around the figure's legs, soft and cold. The air smelled faintly of rain, of wet clothes, of something faintly metallic. He looked human, tall, thin, coat dark against the fog. But there was something wrong, a subtle wrongness I couldn't name. I glanced in the mirrors. The road stretched behind me, empty, yet the shadow moved wrong. Every step I took, it lagged. Every motion of his body didn't match what it should. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered beneath me. The fog pressed against the windshield, and the shadow followed its own rhythm. I drove past him, careful, slow. The headlights illuminated his face briefly. Pale, empty, watching. The coat swayed, but the shadow behind him had hesitated, then twisted impossibly. I blinked. When I looked again, the shadow's motion was delayed, lagging, not falling naturally, not moving with gravity, not following him. It moved wrong. I dared to glance forward. The figure on the road, still waiting, perfectly still, breath visible in the cold night air, eyes locked on me. I looked again in the mirrors. The shadow shifted differently, curved around the fog, moved independently, detached, patient, aware. My chest tightened, hands gripped the wheel, leather rough, slick with sweat. The tires whispered over cracked asphalt. The engine hummed low, steady, the shadow persistent. The hitchhiker's lips moved. No sound reached me, or perhaps the fog swallowed it. The shadow followed its own rhythm, a silent echo behind the figure. I wanted to stop, to see if he would step forward, but the road stretched endlessly. The fog pressed in. Tires whispered. The shadow twisted, lagging behind, never quite matching reality. I exhaled slowly. The smell of damp earth and wet fabric filled the air. The hitchhiker's form seemed sharper now, edges like a cut of pale light, and still the shadow moved wrong. I dared a second glance forward. His thumb remained raised, waiting, patient, the fog curling softly around his boots. Every blink stretched time. Every movement of the tires whispered against the road. Every heartbeat echoed in rhythm with the lagging shadow. I realized then the shadow didn't belong to him. It moved on its own, independent, patient, watching me. I couldn't stop staring. The hitchhiker's body, ordinary. The shadow impossible. Not bound by light. Not bound by physics. Not bound by the rules of the world. The highway stretched ahead. Empty, gray, endless. The fog curled against the tires. I drove slowly past, and the shadow lingered, twisting in ways the body couldn't, moving on its own, detached, silent. I dared not blink again. The hitchhiker waiting, the shadow following, the fog curling, pressing, endless. I drove faster. Tires whispered over asphalt, over gravel, over wet patches. The figure remained in my headlights for a heartbeat longer than possible. The shadow lagged a fraction behind, twisting against reality itself. I exhaled slowly. The air smelled of wet stone, pine, and something else I couldn't name. The fog pressed against the windshield. The hitchhiker was gone, but the shadow, lingering, patient, impossible, stayed just beyond the pale light. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The tires whispered over asphalt, and somewhere in the fog, I knew the shadow would wait. The fog pressed low against the highway, air damp and heavy. Tires whispered over wet asphalt. The night smelled of cold metal and wet pine. I saw it then, an old phone booth, cracked and leaning slightly, glass spiderweb from age or neglect, alone at the edge of the road. I slowed. The tires whispered across gravel. As I pulled up, the hum of the car seemed louder here, confined by silence. Fog wrapped around the booth, curling through the cracks in the glass. I stepped out, cold pressed through my coat, concrete cool beneath my boots. The air smelled faintly of ozone, of damp stone, of rusted metal. The receiver rested in the cradle. I picked it up, cold plastic, smooth yet sticky with age. The line hummed softly, a low vibration, almost a whisper, then a voice, familiar, my own. I froze. Tires whispered under the car. The fog pressed closer. The voice quiet, soft, repeating my name. Slowly, deliberately. I stepped back, heart pressing against ribs. Air thick and damp. The line hummed, almost alive. The voice repeated again. My name. I dared to speak. Nothing came out. Only the whisper of the wind. The hum of the line. The fog curling in. The voice still there. Familiar. Impossible. I glanced around. Empty road. No lights, no movement. Just a booth, cracked glass, the lingering hum. My own name, soft, echoing in the receiver. I pressed the line closer to my ear. The voice spoke my name again. And then something more. Coordinates. Numbers, soft, fragmented. A message, almost hidden, bearing the tone of my own voice. The fog thickened. It curled around the booth, cold against my neck. Concrete pressed against my boots. The The night air smelled of wet asphalt and something metallic. I tried to drop the receiver. It clung to my hand, cold, insistent. The hum pressed through my chest, through my bones. I pulled back. The glass rattled softly. The fog shifted inside the booth, and the line continued, my own voice repeating my name. I dared to glance around. No one, only the booth. Alone, yet somehow alive. I stepped closer. Air damp, heavy, pressing in. The line hummed. I could hear the soft intake of my own breath, and the voice perfectly mirroring me. I tried to speak again. Words failed. Only the line hummed. The coordinates, whispered softly in my own tone. I realized it wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking as me, from somewhere impossible. Cold pressed through my fingers as I held the receiver. The fog curled tighter, pressing against the cracked glass. Tires whispered from the car, distant. The booth alive with my voice. I dropped the receiver. It hit the floor with a soft clatter, and the line went silent. For a heartbeat, a pause, then a whisper again. My voice, repeating my name. I stumbled back. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The fog pressed in. The booth waiting. I turned. The tires whispered beneath the car. The engine hummed low. I got inside, locked the doors. The line hummed faintly even from inside. Not loud, not obvious, but I could feel it through the metal and glass. I drove away slowly, tires whispering across wet asphalt, fog curling around the car. The booth faded behind me, but the voice, soft, insistent, my own, whispering coordinates, my name, softly, endlessly, and I knew it would not stop, not in the road behind me, not in the fog, not ever. The highway stretched straight beneath the fog, air cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered over cracked pavement. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Then I saw it, a bridge rising above the road. Concrete, old, edges chipped, an overpass spanning the highway, empty except for a figure. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. Fog curled around the pillars. The air smelled of rain-soaked concrete, metal, and something faintly acrid. The figure stood at the center, still, perfectly still, eyes glowing faintly in the fog. Small points of pale light, unmoving. I blinked. The tires whispered. The engine hummed beneath me, low, steady, and the figure watched. I exhaled slowly. Fog pressed against the windshield. The bridge seemed higher than it should be. Edges stretched unnaturally. Concrete pillars leaned slightly toward me, as if bending to peer. The figure didn't move. Not a blink. Not a shift. Eyes glowing. Pale, insistent. Watching me. I gripped the wheel tighter. Leather slick under my palms. The tires whispered. The fog pressed in closer. I wanted past quickly, to keep moving. But curiosity, nervous, insistent, held me. The headlights illuminated the bridge's surface. Concrete cracked, rusted railings curling toward the night. The figure's eyes followed, not with movement, but awareness. A gaze that pressed, that knew. I exhaled again. The fog carried the faint smell of ozone, wet stone, and something metallic. The highway beneath me seemed smaller, the overpass looming larger than it should have been. The figure shifted its head slightly, not enough to be noticeable at first, but the glow of the eyes adjusted, following me, patient, relentless. I dared a glance in the rear view. Empty road, no sign of another car, no movement, yet the eyes, etched in memory, glowing faintly, even as I moved away. The bridge stretched overhead. The figure remained, watching, waiting. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered over cracked asphalt. The fog curled closer, pressing into the car's edges. The eyes burned faintly in my mind. The bridge seemed alive. Concrete, breathing softly. I dared another glance forward. The figure unmoving, eyes unblinking. A glow that pressed against perception. Silent, crushing. I wanted to stop, to look closer, but the air pressed against me. Heavy, cold, and I knew stopping was not an option. The overpass stretched endless. Concrete fading into fog at the edges. Tires whispered. The engine hummed low, and the figure remained. A soft breeze shifted. Fog curling around the car, around the pillars. The glow of the eyes dimmed slightly, or maybe it was distance. Still, they followed me in memory long after I passed. I exhaled, hands shaking slightly. Leather warm from grip. Tires whispered. The highway stretched on, empty, fog curling, damp, insistent. I dared one last glance forward. The overpass behind me, a silhouette, the figure's eyes gone, yet lingering in perception, watching from the center of concrete. I drove on. The tires whispered across the cracked asphalt. The engine hummed low, steady. The fog pressed against the car. And in my mind, the eyes remained, glowing, patient, silent, watching. The highway stretched endless under fog and night. Air cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then headlights appeared in the rear view. Dim, steady, a soft glow cutting to the fog. No sound beyond the tires and the hum of my engine, yet the lights followed. I blinked, tried to convince myself it was another traveler, but the distance never changed, no matter how fast I drove, no matter the curves or the stretches. The fog pressed low. Air smelled of damp metal and rain-soaked asphalt. The lights stayed there, patient, silent. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. The headlights moved in rhythm with my speed. Always behind, never closer, never further. I dared a glance in the mirrors. Empty seats. No shape, only the pale glow of the lights. A presence without form. The road stretched straight ahead. Cracked lines under the tires. Fog curling along the shoulders. The lights persistent. I tried to accelerate. Tires whispered faster. Engine hummed low, tense. The headlights matched my pace perfectly. A rhythm, patient, relentless. I exhaled, heart pressing against ribs. Leather gripped tight under my palms. The light stayed, watching, following. I dared a glance behind. Empty road. No car, only the fog curling around the pale points of light. A presence constant. Minutes passed, or hours. Time stretched in the fog. The tires whispered. The engine hummed. The lights remained. I tried to turn. Every curve, every exit, every small road. The headlights followed. Patient, silent, unyielding. I slowed. The fog thickened. Air pressed damp and cold against the windshield. I felt the lights in the mirrors, closer somehow, yet not moving forward, just waiting. I exhaled slowly. The smell of wet asphalt and pine filled the car. Tires whispered over the cracked lines. The lights stayed in place. Constant, watching. I dared a final glance. Empty road behind me. No shape in the headlights. Yet they felt alive, intentional. A presence without form, patient, unbroken. And then they vanished. No flash, no sound. Just gone. I exhaled again. Tires whispered over asphalt. Fog pressed against the car. The air smelled faintly metallic, damp. The absence of the lights, heavier than their presence. I drove on slowly, eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel. The highway stretched empty, but the memory lingered. The headlights, following, never moving closer, never moving away. Patient, silent. I exhaled once more. The tires whispered beneath me. The engine hummed low, and somewhere in the fog I knew they were still there, waiting. The highway curved into darkness again. Fog clung low, wet and heavy. The tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Air smelled of damp metal, wet pine, and cold stone. I saw the station before I recognized it. Abandoned, lights flickering faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Windows grimy, shelves empty, pumps rusted. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. The engine hummed low, steady. Beneath me, fog curled around the car, thick and insistent. Inside, the attendant waited. Behind the counter, tall, thin, coat dark against the pale light, smiling too widely. I blinked. Tires whispered softly. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and ozone. I stepped inside. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The lights flickered. The smile remained. Too wide, too patient. Eyes following, unblinking. I noticed a reflection in the glass. My own, pale and hesitant, and his slower than he moved. A fraction behind, delayed, impossible. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered outside. Fog curling through broken windows. The attendant's smile, patient, deliberate. I stepped closer. Concrete cold, boots echoing softly. The air pressed damp against my skin. The reflection lagged, movements delayed. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. The attendant only smiled wider. Eyes locked on mine. Silent. I leaned forward slightly. The reflection moved slower. Every blink, every breath delayed. The smile stretched impossibly. Edges of the mouth sharper than they should have been. I exhaled. Air smelled faintly of gasoline, damp concrete, and iron. The fog pressed around the station, curling through gaps in the broken windows. I stepped back. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The tires whispered faintly from outside. The attendant remained still, smiling, waiting. I glanced at the door. The fog pressed outside. Tires whispered, yet the reflection still lagged behind him, soft, impossible, patient. I tried to leave. Footsteps echoed softly against concrete. The attendant's eyes followed, unblinking, smile unchanged, and in the glass, the reflection moved slower. I dared to glance at the shelves. Empty, dust covered, forgotten, yet the smell of damp metal lingered. Air pressed thick and cold. I exhaled slowly. Concrete pressed cold against my boots. Tires whispered faintly from outside. The attendant patient, smiling. I stepped toward the door. The fog pressed closer. The glass reflected my movement. Lagging behind me, I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, damp and metallic. Tires whispered. The fog pressed against my face. The attendant's smile stayed, frozen impossibly wide. I stepped outside. The station faded slightly in the fog. Tires whispered beneath me. Engine hummed low. I glanced back once. The attendant remained, eyes fixed, smile patient, deliberate, unchanging. Reflection, still lagging, impossible. I exhaled. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and ozone. The fog pressed low, curling against the asphalt. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The station waiting. I drove away slowly. Tires whispered over asphalt. The fog clung to the edges of the road. The smile lingered in memory. The reflection lingered in memory. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in the station. Not in the glass. Not in the fog. Fog lay thick over the highway. Air cold, damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. I saw it then. A statue by the shoulder. Stone humanoid. Strange. A figure frozen in time. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The hum of the engine pressed low beneath me. Fog curled around the statue, soft and cold. I blinked. Concrete beneath the tires whispered. Air smelled faintly of stone, damp earth, and something metallic. The statue staring at the road. I drove past slowly. The headlights illuminated cracks in its surface. Hands carved too long. Fingers too thin. The expression unreadable. Perfectly still. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered. Fog pressed against the car. And then the figure shifted. Not fully, just enough. Turned, facing the road. I blinked, heart pressing against ribs. Hand gripped the wheel, leather rough and slick with sweat. I looked ahead. The fog stretched along the shoulder. Tires whispered over asphalt. The statue remained in my mind's eye. Eyes turned toward me. I dared another glance. The figure had moved again, subtle, patient. Stone somehow bending, shifting, alive in perception. Watching, I exhaled slowly. Air damp and cold pressed against my face. Concrete beneath the tires whispered softly. The highway stretched endless. The statue waiting. I tried to rationalize. Old stone settling. Wind. Fog curling around its base. But each time I passed, the figure faced the road. Unchanging, unblinking. Its gaze patient. observant. I slowed again. Fog pressed soft, damp against the car. Air smelled faintly of wet stone and pine. Tires whispered over cracks. The statue waited. I exhaled, eyes forward, hand gripping the wheel. The headlights caught the edges of the carved face. Sharp lines, impossible angles, edges softened by fog. Yet the gaze followed. I blinked, and it shifted again. Hands slightly rotated, shoulders subtly twisted. Not fully alive, but not fully stone either. I dared a glance in the mirrors. Nothing behind me, only fog curling around the shoulder. But the memory of the gaze lingering, watching. The road stretched endless. Tires whispered over asphalt. Engine hummed low, steady. The statue, patient, waiting. I tried to drive faster. Headlights cut through the fog. Tires whispered louder. Concrete beneath pressed cold. The figure remained in perception. Every mile passed, and each time, memory of the statue turned to face the road. Subtle shift, impossible timing, patient. I exhaled slowly. Fog pressed low. Air smelled faintly metallic, wet stone. The tires whispered beneath me. The highway stretched endless. I dared a glance forward. No more statues. Only fog, shoulders lined with trees. But the gaze remained, imprinted in my mind. Patient, observant, waiting. I drove on. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low. Concrete cold beneath the wheels. And I knew it would not stop watching. Not at the shoulder. Not in the fog. Not in memory. The highways stretched endless. The fog pressed soft, cold, damp. Tires whispered. And somewhere, the stone figure turned its gaze again. Perfect, patient, unblinking. The desert stretched endless. Pale under the night sky. Air dry, carrying the scent of sand, dust, and heat that lingered even in darkness. Tires whispered softly over cracked asphalt. Then I saw them, dozens of radios, half buried in sand. Silent shapes at first, until the hum began. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. Fog, or maybe dust, curled in the air, soft and thin. The radios hummed low, almost imperceptible. I blinked, tried to convince myself it was wind, static from the tires. But the hum persisted, growing. Soft voices began to slip through. Whispers. Fragmented names. Coordinates. I exhaled slowly. Air smelled faintly metallic, dry, acrid. Tires whispered. Each voice familiar yet impossible. Repeating messages in broken patterns, soft, insistent. I stepped out. Sand cool beneath my boots. Radios half buried. Antennas crooked, dials frozen. The whispers followed me, layering, overlapping. I leaned closer. The hum pressed through the soles of my boots. Static clung to my fingertips as I brushed sand off a radio. And then the message repeated. The same broken sequence. Whispers that felt alive. I exhaled. The desert air pressed dry and cold against my face. Tires whispered faintly behind me. The radios persistent. The voices patient. I walked between them. Half buried in sand, cracked, dented, rusted. Yet every single one whispering the same message. Names, coordinates, fragmented phrases. Not in any language I knew, but somehow understandable. I dared glance up. Stars reflected in the shiny metal surfaces. Too many, moving subtly like the sky itself was listening. The desert stretched endlessly. The radios whispering still. I exhaled slowly. Sand shifted beneath my boots. The air smelled metallic, dry, faintly of ozone. The whispers layering, overlapping, insistent. I tried to leave, back to the car. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low, but the voices followed. Soft, almost inaudible at first. Then louder, layering, repeating. Every radio echoing the same fragmented sequence. Patient, relentless. I glanced back at the field. The radios, the sea of broken metal. Still humming. Whispers drifting upward, curling into the night. I exhaled slowly. The desert stretched endless. The air pressed dry and metallic against my skin. Tires whispered beneath me. I drove on. The hum faded slightly with distance, but the message lingered in my mind. Names, coordinates, soft, broken, endless. I dared to glance back once more. The radios, half buried, cracked, leaning in the sand. Yet I could hear the whispers, soft, patient, repeating, and I knew they would not stop, not in the sand, not in memory, not ever. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. The desert pressed low, and somewhere dozens of radios hummed, whispering the same broken message, patient, relentless, eternal. The highway stretched gray and empty. Fog clung low, curling over the asphalt. Air smelled of wet metal and dust. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then I saw it, a car, smoldering at the roadside, black and metal twisted. Glass melted into shapes I could not name. Smoke rose slowly, curling into the night. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The engine hummed low beneath me. The air pressed damp and acrid against my skin. I stepped closer. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The smell of charred rubber and ash burned faintly in my nose. The car still smoldered, quiet except for the faint hiss of cooling metal. I leaned forward. Seats melted, warped into unrecognizable forms. A thin haze of smoke clung to my coat, and then I saw it, a footprint, fresh, pressed into the ash. Not mine, not burned, not distorted by heat, yet impossibly there, waiting. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. The fog pressed soft and damp. The footprint, patient, silent, impossible. I glanced around. Empty highway. No one. Nothing moved. Only the smoldering car, the ash, the footprint waiting in quiet. I tried to rationalize. Wind shifted ash. Someone had been here, a traveler. But the footprint, fresh, not marred by heat, by dust, by fog. I stepped closer. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air smelled faintly of metal, burned rubber, and rain-soaked asphalt. The footprint, pressed patient, waiting for me to notice. I exhaled slowly. The tires whispered softly. Fog curled low, pressing against the roadside. The car, twisted black shapes, quiet smoke, lingering heat. And the footprint, impossible, silent. I glanced inside the car. Seats warped, melted. Metal twisted, unrecognizable. No movement, no sound. Yet the ash shifted slightly under a gentle breeze, almost as if aware. I dared to step back. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Tires whispered. The fog pressed closer. The footprint remained. Silent, patient, unbroken. I exhaled again. Air pressed damp and metallic. The tires whispered over asphalt. The car smoldered softly. The footprint waiting impossible. I stepped toward the highway. The fog clung to my coat, damp, heavy. Tires whispered beneath me. The smoldering car faded slightly in the haze. I glanced back. The footprint remained, perfectly pressed in ash. Waiting, patient, silent. I got in the car. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. The engine hummed low. Fog pressed against the windshield. I drove on slowly, exhaled slowly. The memory of the footprint burned in my mind. Patient, impossible, silent. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. Fog pressed low and damp. And somewhere, I knew it waited. The burned-out car. The fresh footprint. Patient, silent, eternal. The highway curved under fog and night. Air cold, damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then I saw it. A diner, neon faintly flickering in the haze. Red and blue lights pulsed softly, humming low. Windows dark, yet glowing from within. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. The engine hummed beneath me. Fog curled around the building, soft and damp. I stepped inside. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air smelled of oil, coffee, and something faintly metallic. The diner, alive yet frozen. Every booth full. Figures seated, perfectly still. Bodies stiff, heads forward, breathing. Only a faint hum in the background. Eyes staring straight ahead, not noticing me. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly outside. Fog pressed soft against the windows. Figures unmoving, patient, frozen mid-breath. I walked between the booths. Air pressed damp against my skin. Concrete cold under boots. The smell of coffee strong, yet stale, thick in the air. Every figure staring forward, not blinking, not shifting. I leaned closer to a table. Coffee cup half full, cooling slowly. Figures in booths, unchanged, unmoving. Breath faint, yet audible in my own mind. I dare to glance around. No conversation. No sound beyond my own breath. Only the hum of neon. The faint whisper of air from vents. I exhaled slowly. Fog pressed low, though outside. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The patrons frozen. Mid-breath. Perfectly patient. I tried to rationalize. Statues. Figures. Mannequins. Yet subtle motion. A flicker of a hand. A shift in a shoulder. Impossible timing. Unnoticed unless observed closely. I walked slowly toward the counter. Air smelled faintly of oil, stale coffee metal. Concrete cold. The hum of neon pressed against my ears. I dared to glance at the figures again. Unmoving, yet I felt awareness. A presence behind the stillness. Watching through frozen eyes. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered outside. The fog pressed soft against the windows. Figures patient, silent, unblinking. I stepped back. Concrete cold beneath boots. Air thick, damp, metallic. The diner unchanged. Yet the memory of their gaze pressed against my mind. I walked to the door. Neon flickered softly. Tires whispered faintly on asphalt outside. The air pressed damp, cold. Concrete underfoot, heavy with silence. I glanced back once. Every booth full. Every patron staring forward. Frozen mid-breath. Yet aware. Patient. I exhaled slowly. Fog pressed low. Air smelled of coffee, metal, damp stone. Tires whispered softly over asphalt. I stepped outside. Neon flickered behind me. The diner faded slightly in the haze. Figures frozen. Patient. Watching. I got in the car. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low. Fog pressed against the windshield. The neon glow lingered in my mind. I drove on. Exhaled slowly. The memory of frozen patrons, patient, unblinking mid-breath. The diner waiting, watching. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. Fog pressed soft and cold. And somewhere, I knew the diner would not stop waiting. Fog lay thick over the highway. Air cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. I saw the lights first. Red and blue, soft, pulsing through the fog. Flashing behind me, cutting through the haze. A cruiser. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The engine hummed low beneath me. Fog pressed close, damp and cold. The officer stepped toward the car. Silhouette tall, broad. Uniform dark against the fog. Face hidden in shadow. I exhaled slowly. Concrete cold beneath boots. Air pressed damp and metallic against my skin. The figure, patient. Watching. I rolled down the window. Slightly. No sound came beyond the soft hum of tires and engine. The shadow stretched across the pavement. Not natural. Too long. Twisting. Bending against the light. I blinked. Tires whispered. The fog pressed soft and low. The cruiser, still. The officer, still. I exhaled again. Air smelled faintly of wet asphalt, ozone and something metallic. The shadow pressed against my vision. Patient. Relentless. I dared to glance forward. Empty road. No other vehicles. Just a fog curling around the cruiser. And the shadow, stretching impossibly, waiting. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. The officer didn't move. Only the shadow, bending against the pavement, alive. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. Fog pressed in. The cruiser, patient. Silent. I looked in the rear view. Empty highway behind me. The shadow still stretched impossibly long. Across the cracked asphalt. Pressing, watching. I dared to glance at the figure again. Tall. Still eyes hidden. Uniform pressed against the mist. The shadow, unbound, impossible, patient. I tried to move. Tires whispered over asphalt. Engine hummed low. The shadow moved, subtly, not the figure, not bound by light or body. I exhaled slowly. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air pressed damp and metallic. The officer remained still, watching. The fog curled tighter. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered, and the shadow stretched further, bending against the edges of perception. I dared a final glance. The officer's face hidden, eyes unseeable. Shadow twisting long, patient, pressing against the fog, against reality itself. I exhaled, hands gripping the wheel tight, leather rough beneath my palms. Tires whispered over asphalt. Engine hummed low, steady. I drove on, exhaled slowly. The fog pressed low, cold. The shadow lingered in memory, stretching across cracked asphalt. Patient, relentless. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered, and somewhere I knew the shadow of the officer waited, not for me to see, not for me to reach, but watching. Patient. Fog lay thick over the highway. Air cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then I saw it, a massive billboard rising above the shoulder. Metal rusted, edges jagged. But the message, clear. My name, painted fresh, bold against the weathered surface. Letters sharp, clean, too precise to be coincidence. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The engine hummed low beneath me. Air pressed damp and metallic against my skin. I blinked, tried to rationalize. A prank, a trick of light, but the letters unmistakable. I exhaled slowly. Fog curled along the asphalt. Concrete pressed cold beneath my boots. The highway stretched empty, and my name stared back at me. I stepped closer. Tires whispered faintly. Air smelled faintly of paint, wet metal, ozone. Letters seemed to shift slightly in the fog, just at the edges of perception. I dared to glance around. No one, no other cars, only the fog curling along the shoulder. The billboard waiting. I exhaled again. Hand pressed to the wheel. Leather rough, damp from sweat. The letters, my name, paint fresh, bold, perfect. I tried to drive on. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low, but my eyes drawn back. The billboard patient, watching. I blinked, letters sharp against the haze. Edges seemed to pulse slightly, subtle, insistent. Air pressed damp and metallic. Fog curling around the base of the structure. I dared to glance upward. Nothing moved. No figure, no shape. Just the letters. Perfect. My name repeated across weathered metal. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. Fog pressed soft against the windshield. Concrete cold beneath the tires. I tried to rationalize. Someone ahead, waiting. Someone painting signs in the night. Impossible. The letters too fresh. I glanced forward again. The highway stretched endless. Fog curling low. The billboard waiting. Silent. Patient. I exhaled slowly. Hand gripping the wheel tight. Tires whispered over asphalt. Engine hummed low. I drove on. The billboard faded slightly in the haze. But my name lingered, etched in memory. Bold. Perfect. I dared a final glance back. Fog curling along the shoulder. Highway empty. Only the memory of the letters, fresh, sharp, precise. Patient. Watching. The air smelled faintly metallic, damp, cold. Tires whispered beneath me. Fog pressed low, curling against the car. And I knew it would not stop. Not in memory. Not in perception. Not ever. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. The fog pressed soft and damp. And somewhere the billboard waited. Patient. Perfect. Watching. The highway stretched flat and pale under the night sky. Air dry, carrying the smell of sand, dust, and sun-baked stone cooling in darkness. Tires whispered softly over cracked asphalt. Then I saw it. A rest area, small and forgotten. Concrete benches, shade structures worn and cracked. Signs faded, peeling under the moonlight. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. The engine hummed low beneath me. Fog or dust curled in the air, soft and cold. I stepped out. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air smelled faintly of dry earth, metal, and something acrid. The rest area, quiet, empty yet waiting. I glanced at the walls. Scratched into stone, etched deep warnings. Don't stop after dark. Letters jagged, fresh in some places, older and faded in others. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. The air pressed dry against my skin. The warning pressed against my mind. Patient, insistent, I walked between the benches. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Dust curling around my shoes. Air smelled faintly metallic, acrid and dry. I dared to glance around. Empty. No cars. No other travelers. Only the moonlight tracing edges of cracked concrete. I exhaled again. Tires whispered over asphalt. Air pressed low, damp from distant fog, though the desert was dry. The warning letters, jagged, deep, patient. I stepped closer to the signs. Concrete cool beneath my fingertips. Scratches deep, edges sharp against my skin. The words impossible to ignore. Don't stop after dark. I exhaled slowly. Fog pressed soft against the highway. The desert stretched endless. Concrete underfoot, cold. The warnings lingered in my mind. I dared to glance around again. Empty. The highway stretched pale and quiet. No lights in the distance. Only dust curling along the edges. I tried to rationalize. Warnings carved by others long ago. Vandalism. A prank. Yet something pressed in the air. Soft. Insistent. Watching. I walked to the benches. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Dust shifting softly as I stepped. The rest area patient. Waiting. The warnings pressing. I glanced at the concrete walls again. Scratches deep. Letters jagged. Some edges fresh. Still sharp. The words repeated in memory. Etched into perception. Don't stop after dark. I exhaled slowly. Hands gripping the wheel of my car in thought. Tires whispered over asphalt. The desert pressed low. Air smelled faintly metallic, dry, acrid. I stepped back to the car. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Dust curling softly around tires. The warnings lingered in the air. Soft, patient, impossible to ignore. I got in the car. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low. Fog or desert dust pressed soft against the windshield. I glanced back once. The rest area, quiet, empty, yet alive in memory. Concrete benches. Shade structures cracked. Warnings jagged. Don't stop after dark. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. The desert stretched endless. Air pressed dry, metallic, acrid. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in memory. Not on the highway. Not ever. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. Dust pressed low. And somewhere, the desert rest area waited. Patient. Silent. Watching. The highway stretched along the desert edge. Air cold. Damp with night. Carrying the faint smell of pine and wet stone. Tires whispered softly over cracked asphalt. I saw the lake before I knew it. Still, perfectly smooth. Glass-like under the pale moonlight. No ripples. No wind disturbing its surface. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. The engine hummed low beneath me. Air pressed damp and cold against my skin. I stepped out. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The smell of wet stone and faint algae rose from the edge. Fog or mist curled softly across the surface. I leaned closer. The reflection, perfect stars mirrored in the lake. Too many, moving subtly like eyes shifting, blinking. Watching me. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. Air pressed cold, damp, metallic. The stars and the water. Too many, too deliberate. I crouched at the edge. Surface smooth beneath my fingers. No ripple, no distortion. And yet the eyes moved. Slow, deliberate, unblinking. I dared to glance around. Highway empty. No other travelers. No sound beyond tires whispering and faint hum of night insects. The lake, patient. Watching. I exhaled again. Air smelled faintly of wet stone, algae, metal. Concrete cold beneath my boots. The reflection pressed into my mind. Eyes in the stars, shifting, unrelenting. I stepped back. Fog pressed soft, curling over my boots. Tires whispered over asphalt. The lake remained still, glassy, perfect. Eyes blinking in silence. I tried to move on. Tires whispered beneath me. Engine hummed low. Yet the memory, the shifting stars, pressed against my mind. I dared to glance back. Surface perfectly smooth. Reflection unbroken. Stars, too many, moving like eyes watching. Patient, silent. I exhaled slowly. Air pressed damp and cold. Tires whispered softly. Concrete underfoot, still cold. I walked to the car. Fog curling low. Around tires. Air smelled faintly metallic, wet, alive. The lake, a mirror of too many stars. Shifting, watching, unblinking. I got in. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low, steady. Fog pressed soft against the windshield. I drove on slowly. Exhaled slowly. The image of the glassy surface. Endless stars, too many eyes. Patient, unblinking, watching. I dared to glance back once more. The lake glimmered faintly under the pale moonlight. Stars moved slightly, subtle, deliberate. Eyes in the reflection, alive. I exhaled again. Tires whispered beneath me. The highway stretched endless. Air pressed cold, damp, metallic. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in memory. Not on the road. Not ever. The highway stretched endless. Tires whispered. Fog pressed low. And somewhere the glassy lake waited. Perfect. Patient. Watching. The highway stretched dark and empty. Air cold, damp, carrying a faint smell of rust and wet asphalt. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then I saw it. An old school bus, rusted, abandoned in the weeds. Windows cracked, metal peeling. Silent. Waiting. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel at the shoulder. The engine hummed low beneath me. Air pressed damp and metallic against my skin. I stepped out. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Weeds rustled softly around the tires. The bus, patient, silent, watching. I dared glance inside. Every seat filled. Mannequins. Stiff, pale, perfect. All turned toward the door. No eyes, no blink, yet they felt aware. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. Air smelled faintly metallic, damp and acrid. The mannequins, patient, waiting. I stepped closer. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Weeds brushed my ankles, rustling softly. Every figure facing me, still, breath faint in the back of my mind. I leaned forward slightly. Seats warped, dusty. Mannequin faces pale, smooth, perfect. Not human, not dead, yet to wear, watching. I exhaled again. Tires whispered softly over asphalt. Fog pressed low against the bus. Every figure, unblinking, patient, silent. I dared to glance around. Highway empty. No one, no other vehicles. Only the rusted bus and its occupants. Waiting. I tried to rationalize. Old toys, mannequins, someone's forgotten practice. Yet the posture, the attention, impossible. They followed me with a patient awareness. Beyond motion. I stepped closer to the doorway. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Weeds rustled softly. Air smelled faintly of dust, metal, decay. The bus silent. Seats filled, all facing the door. Watching. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. Engine hummed low. The mannequins unbroken, patient. Their awareness pressed into memory. I dared to glance inside again. Every seat still facing me. Not a figure shifted. Not a blink. Yet I felt them following, silent, patient, unyielding. I stepped back. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air pressed damp, metallic, acrid. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. I got in the car. Engine hummed low. Fog pressed soft against the windshield. Weeds rustled faintly around the tires. I drove on slowly. Exhaled slowly. The memory of the bus, of every seat filled. Patient, unblinking, waiting. I dared to glance back. The bus faded slightly in the fog. Yet I felt it. Awareness. Patient. Silent. I exhaled again. Tires whispered beneath me. Highways stretched endless. Air pressed cold, damp, metallic. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in memory. Not on the highway. Not ever. The abandoned bus. Seats filled. Figures facing the door. Patient. Silent. Watching. The highway stretched flat beneath a dark sky. Air cold, damp. Carrying the faint smell of asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then it happened. The sky split. Silence pressed into the air. A pale beam of light flooded the road ahead. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The engine hummed low beneath me. Air pressed damp and metallic against my skin. I stepped out. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air smelled faintly of ozone and wet stone. The beam reached down, pale and silent. I blinked, tried to make sense. Nothing moved in the light. No figure. No shape. Only the road, washed in strange pale illumination. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. Air pressed cold and heavy. The beam unyielding. Silent. Patient. I dared a glance upward. The sky fractured. Stars scattered unevenly. A void where darkness should be. Light poured down in impossible angles. I exhaled again. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air smelled faintly metallic, dry, electric. The road stretched endless under the pale flood. I stepped closer to the center. Tires whispered softly. Dust and gravel shifted beneath boots. The light pressing down. Soft, silent, unnerving. I dared to move my hand into the beam. Air tingled against skin. A faint hum pressed in my ears. Time slowed, or maybe stopped. Impossible to tell. I exhaled slowly. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Tires whispered faintly. The beam of light constant, patient, unblinking. I glanced around. Highway empty. No other travelers. No sound beyond my breath and the faint hum. The sky open. I dared to glance upward again. Pale light stretched across the asphalt. Stars uneven, shifted strangely. The void above pressed silently into my mind. I exhaled slowly. Air pressed damp, metallic, electric. Concrete beneath boots cold. The road endless. The light eternal. I stepped back toward the car. Tires whispered softly over asphalt. Engine hummed low. Fog, or dust, pressed along the edges of the highway. I dared to glance back at the beam. The sky remained split. Light poured down in pale, perfect angles. Time suspended. Silent. Eternal. I exhaled again. Air pressed heavy, damp, metallic. Tires whispered beneath me. The highway stretched endless. I got in the car. Engine hummed low. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt. The beam followed faintly in memory. I drove on slowly. Exhaled slowly. The memory of the split sky pressed into my mind. Time paused. Light poured down. Silent, patient, eternal. I dared one final glance. The sky fractured. Pale light stretching endlessly. Stars uneven, shifting like eyes. Time stopped. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered beneath me. Highways stretched endless. Air pressed cold, metallic, damp. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in memory. Not in the sky. Not ever. The highways stretched endless. Tires whispered. Fog pressed low. And somewhere the sky remained split. Silent. Patient. Watching. The highway stretched pale beneath a dark sky. Air cold, damp. Carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. Tires whispered softly over cracked pavement. Then it ended. Concrete wall rising abruptly ahead. No warning. No signs. Just a road, swallowed by darkness behind me. I slowed. Tires whispered over gravel. The engine hummed low beneath me. Air pressed damp and metallic against my skin. I stepped out. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Fog curled softly along the wall. The highway vanished behind me. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly behind me. Air pressed heavy, damp, metallic. Silence stretched. Patient, unyielding. I dared to glance around. Empty highway. No lights in the distance. No cars. No travelers. only the wall, looming. I stepped closer. Concrete rough beneath my boots. Air smelled faintly of wet stone, ozone and something acrid. The wall, unbroken, unyielding. I tried to move. Tires whispered softly over cracked asphalt. Engine hummed low, but every step felt longer than before. The highway gone behind me. I exhaled slowly. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Air pressed damp and heavy. The wall, patient, immovable, silent. I dared to glance behind again. Blackness stretched endlessly. No trace of the road I had driven. Only fog curling low along the shoulder. Patient, waiting. I tried to touch the wall. Concrete rough beneath my fingers. Cold pressed against my skin. No cracks. No edges. Only solid, patient stone. I exhaled slowly. Tires whispered faintly in memory. Air pressed damp, metallic, heavy. The wall constant. The blackness behind constant. I stepped back. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Fog pressed low, curling at the edges. Highway vanished. Engine hummed low, faint. I dared to glance at the horizon. Nothing. No stars. No lights. Only fog, low and patient. The wall looming. I exhaled slowly. Air smelled faintly metallic, damp, acrid. Tires whispered beneath me. The highway gone. Memory pressed into reality. I stepped toward the car. Concrete cold beneath my boots. Fog curling softly around tires. Engine hummed low. The wall waiting. Patient. I got in. Tires whispered over asphalt. Fog pressed against the windshield. The highway stretched invisible behind me. Nothing moved. I drove on slowly. Exhaled slowly. The wall looming. The road gone. Memory pressed into perception. Patient. Immovable. Silent. I dared to glance back once more. Blackness stretched endlessly. No trace of the asphalt. No signs of travel. Only the wall, unyielding, waiting. I exhaled again. Tires whispered beneath me. Highway stretched endless, invisible. Air pressed cold, metallic, damp. And I knew it would not stop waiting. Not in memory. Not in the road. Not ever. The dead end. Concrete wall rising. Highway swallowed by blackness. Patient. Silent. Watching. The highway stretched endless beneath a dark, empty sky. Air dry. Faintly metallic. Carrying the smell of cracked asphalt and desert dust. Tires whispered softly over the broken pavement. I left the car behind. Keys cold in my pocket. Boots pressing into cracked asphalt. No headlights. No engine hum. Only the night stretching in every direction. I exhaled slowly. Concrete rough beneath my soles. Air pressed dry, heavy metallic. The highway endless. Patient. I walked. Soft footsteps echoed faintly. Swallowed by the night. Fog curling along the edges of the asphalt. Air smelled faintly of dust, ozone, and something waiting. I dared to glance around. No signs. No guardrails. Nothing familiar. Only broken pavement stretching into darkness. Patient. Silent. I exhaled again. Air pressed against my face. Boots pressing against cracked stone. The night alive with subtle, impossible hums. Not from the earth. Not from the sky. But somewhere in between. I walked on. Every step longer than the last. Every breath heavier, colder. The highway endless. No landmarks. No horizon. Only the soft whisper of my own movement. I glanced down. Cracks in the asphalt. Jagged, impossible. Concrete shifting subtly under my feet. A sense of distance lost. A place slipping. I exhaled slowly. Air pressed dry, metallic. Thick. Soft wind stirred dust around my boots. The highway patient. Watching. I dared to glance behind. Nothing. Only darkness stretching endlessly. No trace of the car. No lights. Only the broken pavement disappearing into fog. I walked faster. Tires. Only memory now. Soft footsteps pressing. Air metallic. Dry. Impossible to ignore. The highway. Stretching. Endless. Infinite. I dared to glance ahead. The broken asphalt. Jagged. Uneven. No markings. No shoulder. Only a stretch of emptiness that seemed to breathe. Patient, silent, waiting. I exhaled again. Concrete rough beneath my boots. Air pressed damp and metallic. The night heavy with impossible stillness. I walked, every step echoing softly in my mind. Every crack in the asphalt a warning or a promise. No signs. No end. Only the night stretching, stretching. I dared to stop. Concrete cold beneath my soles. Air heavy, metallic, pressing in. Silence absolute. The highway, gone behind me, endless ahead. Patient, eternal. I exhaled slowly. Boots pressing stone. Air carrying dust, ozone, and the faintest whisper of something alive. The broken pavement unbroken in its impossibility. I walked again, each step stretching further. The night pressing closer. The highway infinite. No destination. No exit. I glanced around. Nothing moved. No signs of life. Only cracked asphalt under a black sky. Patient. Waiting. I exhaled. Soft wind stirred dust along the cracks. Air metallic, dry, heavy. Every step pressing against memory, reality, sense. I walked on. The last mile impossible, endless. No landmarks. No sound beyond my breath. No light. Only the cracked highway stretching toward nowhere. I dared a final glance back. Nothing. Blackness stretched behind me. No car. No light. Only the road, endless, patient, eternal. I exhaled slowly. Air pressed cold, dry, metallic. Concrete rough beneath my boots. The night unbroken. The last mile unending. And I knew it would not stop. Not in memory. Not in place. Not ever. The highway stretched endless. Boots whispered softly over cracked asphalt. Air pressed metallic, heavy, alive. And somewhere the last mile waited. Patient, silent, eternal.